The sun bounced off the rows of shiny sports cars in the executive parking lot, making the pavement look like it was covered in diamonds. Every car there cost more than a family home. Then there was my car. It was a 20-year-old sedan with a massive dent in the passenger door and an engine that rattled like a can of nails. I parked it in the very last spot, feeling the eyes of the high-end security guards on me. I climbed out, adjusting my thrift store suit. It was a bit too big in the shoulders, and the fabric was faded from too many washes. To everyone at Sterling Global, I was just Leo, the new low-level intern. I was the guy who carried the heavy boxes and made sure the coffee pot stayed full. But as I walked toward the glass doors, I adjusted a tiny invisible camera hidden in the knot of my tie. Nobody knew the truth. I wasn't a struggling student desperate for a paycheck. I was Leo Sterling, the secret owner of this empire. My first task of the morning was to bring a tray of lattes to the main board meeting. My hands were a bit shaky, but not because I was nervous. I was actually excited to see the real face of my company. When the leaders think no one important is watching, they show who they truly are. I entered the room quietly, keeping my head down. My manager, a man named Victor, was sitting at the head of the table. He was busy bragging to the other executives about his new gold watch, turning his wrist so the light hit the diamonds. He didn't even look at me as I approached. He just pointed at a coaster without stopping his story. As I reached down to set his drink, the tray tipped just a fraction of an inch. 3 drops of hot coffee splashed onto the tip of his expensive leather shoes. The room went silent instantly. I saw Victor's face turn a bright, angry shade of red. Victor didn't just get annoyed, he looked at me with pure, unfiltered disgust. He stood up slowly, his expensive chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. He towered over me, his chest puffed out. "You clumsy, pathetic idiot," he shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Do you have any idea how much these shoes cost? They were custom made in Italy. They probably cost more than you make in an entire year, you little rat." I stayed still, letting the camera and my tie record every second of his tantrum. The other executives looked away, some of them smirking. I realized then that the culture I had built from the top hadn't reached this floor. Victor reached out and flicked a drop of coffee off his shoe and onto my sleeve. "Look at you," he sneered. "You're a mess. Sterling Global is an elite company for elite people. We aren't a charity for the homeless. Why were you even hired?" I kept my voice low and steady. "I'm sorry, sir, it was an accident. I can get a cloth and clean it for you." Victor let out a harsh, jagged laugh. He looked at the other managers, seeking their approval. "Accidents are for people with worth, Leo. You're just a mistake. You don't belong in a room like this. Look at that suit. It looks like you crawled out of a dumpster this morning." The other managers chuckled, trying to stay on Victor's good side. They didn't want to be his next target. Victor pointed toward the door. "Go get a bucket and some bleach. After you scrub the coffee off the floor, I want you to scrub every toilet on this floor. It's the only job you're actually fit for. Get out of my sight before I decide to fire you right now." I nodded slowly, picked up my tray, and walked out without saying another word. I walked down the hallway, feeling the weight of the empty tray in my hands. As soon as I reached the quiet supply closet, I locked the door and tapped the tiny earpiece hidden in my ear. "Elena, did you get that?" I whispered. My personal assistant, Elena, was sitting in a secret office 3 blocks away, monitoring the feed. "Every single word, Leo," she said, her voice sounding sharp with anger. "He just violated 5 different company policies on workplace bullying and harassment in under 3 minutes. The video quality is perfect. We have him." I leaned against the cold metal shelves, breathing deeply. Victor thought he was the king of the castle, but he was actually digging a very deep grave for his career. "Keep the recording going," I told her. "I want to see how deep he can go. If he's treating me this way, he's treating others even worse." For the next 3 days, I became Victor's personal punching bag. He gave me every dirty job he could find. I was forced to carry heavy crates of files into the basement where the air was thick with dust. I was made to stay late into the night shredding documents while he sat in his office drinking expensive scotch. Every time he passed my cubicle, he would make a comment about my poverty. He told me I smelled like cheap struggle and laughed when I ate a simple peanut butter sandwich for lunch. He even started calling me Dumpster Leo in front of the other interns. I took it all. I recorded every insult, every condescending look, and every moment he used company resources for his own selfish gain. He was so busy feeling superior that he didn't notice the silent predator standing right in front of him. On Thursday afternoon, Victor threw a thick stack of papers on my desk. "I need these organized by city and zip code by tomorrow morning," he snapped. "And don't even think about leaving early. We have the big anniversary gala tomorrow night, and I don't want any poor person energy slowing us down." He leaned in close, his breath smelling like peppermint to hide the alcohol. "You're going to be working the event, Leo, but not as a guest. You'll be wearing a waiter's jacket and serving drinks. I want you in the back near the kitchen. I don't want our investors seeing a guy who looks like he's missing his rent payment." I looked at him and nodded. "I'll be there, Victor. I wouldn't miss it for the world." He smirked and walked away, convinced he had successfully put me in my place. Friday night arrived, and the luxury hotel ballroom was draped in silk and gold. This was a hotel I had purchased 2 years ago, but Victor didn't know that either. He arrived in a tuxedo that cost $5,000, walking with his chest out like he owned the building. I was in the back wearing a white waiter's jacket that was slightly yellowed at the collar. I spent the first 2 hours carrying trays of champagne to people who didn't even see me. I was a ghost in my own house. I watched Victor move through the crowd, shamelessly lying to important investors. He was telling anyone who would listen that he was a close personal friend of the mysterious Leo Sterling. He claimed he gave me advice on how to run the business. It was almost funny to watch him play the part of a visionary leader while I stood 3 feet away holding a tray of empty glasses. As the night went on, Victor got louder and more arrogant. He pulled me aside near the grand marble fountain in the center of the lobby. There were a few wealthy guests nearby watching. Victor reached into his silk pocket and pulled out a crumpled, dirty $5 bill. With a cruel grin, he tossed it into the deep water of the fountain. "Go get that, Leo," he laughed loudly so everyone could hear. "It's probably the biggest tip you've ever seen in your life. Since you love being poor so much, you should enjoy the swim." He reached out and gave me a hard shove toward the water. My expensive tie, the one with the hidden camera, dipped into the pool as I stumbled. I caught my balance, but I was dripping wet from the waist down. The guests stared in shock, but Victor was howling with laughter, pointing at me. "Look at him," Victor shouted to the crowd. "He's a drowned rat that's your place kid in the gutter looking for scraps." I stood there, the cold water soaking into my shoes, the same shoes he had mocked on my first day. I wiped a stray drop of water from my eyes and looked at him. I didn't look down, I didn't look ashamed. I looked at him with a cold, piercing gaze that made his laughter die down just a little bit. "Is that really how you feel about your employees, Victor?" I asked. My voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was loud, clear, and carried across the entire lobby. Victor sneered, trying to regain his cool. "Who cares how I feel? I'm a director at Sterling Global and you're a nothing, you're a zero. Now get out of here before I have security throw you out for being an eyesore." I reached into my wet pocket and pulled out a small, waterproof remote. It looked like a car key, but it was much more powerful. I looked Victor in the eye and clicked the red button. Suddenly, the upbeat jazz music playing through the ballroom speakers cut out. The giant high-definition screens on the walls, which had been showing a loop of the company's logo, suddenly flickered and changed. A video started playing. It was Victor in the boardroom calling me a rat. It was Victor in the basement mocking my thrift store suit. It was Victor telling his friends that the owner was a weak fool he could easily manipulate. The entire party went dead silent. Hundreds of the most powerful people in the city watched as Victor's true nature was broadcast in 4K resolution. Victor turned as white as a sheet. He looked at the screens, then at me, then back at the screens. "What is this? This is a hack. Stop this immediately," he screamed, his voice cracking with fear. He lunged for my remote, but I stepped back. 2 of my head security guards, men who actually knew who I was, stepped out from behind a pillar and blocked his path. They were massive men in black suits, and they didn't look like they were joking. I reached up and pulled off the cheap, messy wig I had been wearing for 2 weeks. I took off the thick, fake glasses and straightened my posture. I took off the yellowed waiter's jacket, revealing a custom-tailored shirt underneath. On my cuff was the Sterling family crest, a small lion made of solid platinum. I walked slowly toward the small stage at the front of the ballroom. Every eye in the room followed me. Some of the board members who had met me years ago began to realize the truth. Their mouths dropped open. I grabbed the microphone from the podium and looked out at the sea of shocked faces. "Good evening," I said. My voice was calm, but it had the weight of total authority. "Most of you know me as the intern who couldn't hold a coffee tray. Some of you called me Dumpster Leo. But my real name is Leo Sterling. I am the founder and sole owner of this company." A collective gasp went through the room. I looked directly at Victor, who looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He was shaking so hard his champagne glass shattered on the floor. "Victor," I said, my voice echoing through the silence. "You told me that Sterling Global was an elite company. You told me it wasn't a charity for the poor. You were right about one thing, it is a place for the best. But you forgot that being the best starts with being a decent human being." I started walking down the steps of the stage, heading straight for him. He tried to back away, but he hit the edge of the fountain. "You thought you were a leader because you had an expensive watch and custom shoes. But a leader doesn't build himself up by tearing others down. You are a cancer in this company, and today the surgery begins." Victor tried to speak, his lips moving but no sound coming out. "I spent 2 weeks living the life of the people you look down on," I continued. "I saw how you treat the people who actually make this company run. You treat them like trash because you think they can't fight back. You think your title gives you the right to be a bully." I turned to the head of security. "Escort Victor out of this building immediately. He is fired for gross misconduct, effective 10 minutes ago. I want his corporate accounts frozen and his access to the building revoked. I also want a full audit of his department. If he's been stealing from the people he works with, I want him in handcuffs by Monday." The security guards grabbed Victor by his arms. He finally found his voice, but it was a pathetic whimper. "Leo, please, I was just testing you. I knew it was you. I was joking." I leaned in close to Victor as the guards started to drag him away. "That's the biggest lie you've told all night," I whispered. "And you've told a lot of them. You didn't know it was me. You treated me that way because you thought I was beneath you, and that is exactly why you will never work in this industry again." As the guards pulled him toward the exit, the rest of the room was still frozen. I looked at the other executives, the ones who had laughed at his jokes and watched him roast me in the boardroom. I saw the fear in their eyes. They were wondering if I had been watching them too. The truth was I had. I turned back to the crowd. "To the rest of you," I said, "take this as a warning. Sterling Global is changing tonight. We are going back to the values this company was founded on: respect, integrity, and hard work. If you think your salary gives you the right to mistreat an intern, a janitor, or a secretary, then you don't belong here. I will be reviewing the footage of every manager in this room." You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. I saw several people wipe sweat from their foreheads. I wasn't there to be their friend, I was there to be their boss. I stepped down from the podium and walked toward the back of the room. I saw the kitchen staff and the other waiters standing by the doors, their eyes wide with wonder. These were the people Victor had called trash. I walked up to the young man who had been my partner serving drinks all night. He was a 20-year-old student named Silas who was working 3 jobs to pay for his mother's medical bills. Victor had yelled at him earlier for not being fast enough with the ice. I reached out and shook his hand. "Silas," I said, "you did a great job tonight. On Monday morning, I want you to come to the executive suite. We're starting a new scholarship program and you're the first person on the list." Silas looked like he was about to cry. I walked out of the hotel and into the cool night air. The valet who had watched Victor make fun of my rusty car earlier came running over. He looked terrified. "Mr. Sterling, let me get a car for you. We have a limousine waiting." I shook my head and pointed to my old dented sedan sitting under the street lamp. "No thanks," I said. "I like this car. It reminds me of where I came from." I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine let out its familiar rattle, but to me, it sounded like a victory lap. I drove out of the lot, passing the row of Ferraris and Lamborghinis without a second glance. I had $1 billion in the bank, but I felt the most powerful when I was just Leo. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. "Secret billionaire fires bully manager at gala." The video of Victor throwing the $5 bill into the fountain had gone viral. By noon, 3 other companies where Victor had worked previously came forward with stories of his harassment. His career was over, but my work was just beginning. I spent the weekend at my house, not in the mansion, but in a small apartment I kept in the city. I reviewed the rest of the footage Alina had gathered. There were 2 other managers who had been almost as bad as Victor. They were the next to go. On Monday morning, I walked through the front doors of Sterling Global. This time I wasn't wearing a thrift store suit. I was wearing a perfectly fitted charcoal suit, but I wasn't wearing the wig or the glasses. The security guards at the front stood at attention, bowing their heads as I passed. The lobby was buzzing with energy. People were talking in hushed tones about the great cleaning that was happening. I headed straight for the executive floor. When I stepped off the elevator, the silence was heavy. Every employee was standing by their desk, looking at me with a mix of awe and nervousness. I walked into Victor's old office. It was a massive corner room with a view of the entire city. It was filled with expensive art and leather furniture he had bought with company money. I looked at the desk where he had once sat and mocked my sandwich. "Elena," I said into my phone, "I want this office turned into a break room for the staff. Rip out the carpet, take down the art, and put in a high-end kitchen and comfortable chairs. If Victor liked to call people trash, we'll turn his throne into a place where everyone is welcome." Elena laughed on the other end. "Consider it done, Leo." I held a general meeting in the cafeteria an hour later. I didn't want to be in the boardroom. I wanted to be where the real work happened. I stood on a lunch table so everyone could see me. "I want to apologize to all of you," I said. "I let a man like Victor run this floor for too long because I was too busy looking at the numbers and not the people. That stops today. We are creating an anonymous reporting system for harassment, and I will personally review every claim. We are also raising the minimum wage for all entry-level positions by 20%. The room erupted in a roar of cheers that lasted for minutes. As I walked back to the elevators, I saw a familiar face in the hallway. It was the other intern who had laughed along with Victor during the coffee spill. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. I stopped in front of him. He was shaking. "Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry. I was just trying to fit in." I looked at him for a long time. "Fitting in with a bully makes you a bully too," I said. "You aren't fired, but you are being transferred to our logistics warehouse for 6 months. You'll be loading trucks and working with the people Victor called trash. If you learn how to respect them, you can come back. If not, don't bother." By the end of the month, Sterling Global was a different place. Productivity was higher than it had ever been, but the atmosphere was lighter. People were smiling in the hallways. I still drove my old dented sedan to work every once in a while just to keep myself grounded. I knew that Victor was out there somewhere, likely trying to explain away the viral video, but I didn't care. I had learned that the most important part of owning a billion-dollar company wasn't the money. It was the power to make sure that the little guy finally had a voice. I walked into my office, sat down at my desk, and started to work. The secret was out, but the real boss was finally home.